I didn't catch her cheating because I was suspicious. I caught her because I still trusted her enough to show up unannounced. One hotel hallway, one closed door, and a sound I wasn't meant to hear. That was all it took to break a marriage I had spent years holding together in silence. What followed wasn't shouting or revenge, but something colder, slower, and final. And if you've ever stayed quiet too long, you might recognize yourself in what came next. I used to think our life in Atlanta was steady, not exciting, not broken either. Mornings started early. I left the house before traffic thickened, grabbed coffee from the same place near the interstate, nodded at people who knew my face but not my story. At work, decisions carried weight. People listened when I spoke. That part of my life made sense. At home, things were quieter in a different way. Dinner schedules changed without discussion. Bills moved between accounts I didn't remember approving. Plans were made, then handed to me as facts. "I already told your sister you'd cover it," she said once, not looking up from her phone. It wasn't a question. It rarely was. I told myself it was normal. Marriage meant compromise. Being a husband meant absorbing stress so it didn't spill onto the kids. Being a man meant not reacting to every small disrespect. That's what I'd learned growing up. You carry the load. You don't complain about the weight. Still, there were moments that lingered longer than they should have. A joke at my expense in front of friends. A comment about how my job wasn't flexible enough when I asked about plans I hadn't agreed to. Her parents calling me directly about money, already assuming the answer. I paid. I adjusted. I stayed quiet. The night it crossed a line didn't look dramatic from the outside. Just another evening at home. I came back later than usual, tired enough to want silence more than food. The kids were upstairs. The TV was on low. She was at the kitchen table, papers spread out like she owned the place and everything in it. "I moved some funds," she said. "Just temporary." She slid a document toward me. My name was there. My signature wasn't. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision made without me, about something that wasn't hers alone. "We needed it," she added quickly. "You always figure things out anyway." That sentence landed harder than she realized. I asked a few questions, kept my voice level. She answered with impatience, like I was slowing her down. When I pointed at the line that mattered, the one that could affect my job if things went wrong, she waved it off. "You're overthinking it." Maybe I was. That's what I told myself as I folded the paper and set it back on the table. Starting a fight wouldn't fix anything. I'd clean it up later. I always did. I went upstairs, checked on the kids, stood a little longer than usual in the doorway. Their breathing was even, safe. That mattered. When I came back down, she was already on the phone, laughing softly, voice lowered in a way she hadn't used with me in a while. I grabbed my keys without saying anything and stepped outside. The air felt heavier than it should have. I sat in the car, hands resting on the wheel, staring straight ahead. For the first time, the thought came clearly, without panic or drama. This isn't patience anymore. It felt like erasing myself piece by piece and calling it love. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and let the routine of driving take over while that realization stayed with me, quiet but steady, following me down the road. The next morning didn't announce itself as a turning point. Coffee still tasted the same. Traffic moved the way it always did. I showed up to work on time, nodded at familiar faces, stepped into meetings where my voice still carried authority. On the surface, nothing had shifted. Underneath, things had started to drift. A colleague asked, half joking, whether I'd be traveling more now that my wife had projects out of state. The word projects lingered longer than it should have. I hadn't mentioned any changes. I smiled, gave a vague answer, moved the conversation back to numbers and deadlines. The room followed, but something stayed behind with me. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed twice from the school. Not emergencies, questions. A change in pickup authorization. A note about who would be handling after-school arrangements going forward. I didn't remember discussing any of it, yet my name was already attached to approval emails I hadn't written. At home, the kids asked simple things that carried weight I wasn't ready for. "Mom said you're busy this week," my son said, shoes still on, backpack dropped where it didn't belong. Busy had become a convenient explanation, one that didn't require details. I nodded, told him we'd figure dinner out together, watched him accept that answer without pushing back. Kids learn early when not to ask. Messages started coming from family friends, casual check-ins, invitations phrased like favors. I sensed a current running beneath the words, shaped by conversations I hadn't been part of. No one accused me of anything. No one needed to. Assumptions did the work on their own. Part of me wanted to let it pass, let the noise settle, handle the paperwork quietly, restore order without confrontation. That instinct had kept things functioning for years. Smooth edges, patch cracks, keep everyone comfortable, even if it meant shrinking myself a little more each time. Another part resisted, not loudly, just enough to make everything feel heavier. I drove across town after work, not home, not anywhere urgent. The steering wheel stayed steady under my hands, while thoughts circled without landing. Doing nothing had always been framed as patience, strength. But patience only worked when the other side respected the pause. This felt different, like standing still while the ground kept moving. I met Marcus at a small place near his office. We'd known each other long enough to skip small talk. He ordered first. I followed without looking at the menu. "You look tired," he said, not unkindly. I shrugged, gave him pieces, not the whole thing. Paperwork moved without my consent, people assuming decisions I hadn't made. The sense of being managed inside my own life. Marcus listened without interrupting. Let silence do its work. "So," he said finally, "what happens if you don't fix it this time?" The question landed clean. No advice, no judgment. "It affects the kids," I said. "And you?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud would make it harder to ignore. He didn't rush me. "You've been protecting everyone else for a long time," he added. "Just asking who's protecting you." That was it. No speech, no dramatic framing. Just a question that exposed how alone the silence had become. We paid, walked out together, stood by our cars for a moment longer than necessary. He didn't tell me what to do. Didn't need to. The drive home felt shorter than usual, though my thoughts hadn't settled. Inside, the house was louder than it should have been for that hour. Voices carried from another room. A call already in progress. Decisions still being made. I set my keys down slowly, listened without stepping in yet, and realized how far the ripples had already spread while I was trying not to make waves. The voices cut off when I stepped into the room. Phones shifted. A smile showed up a second too late. "I'll call you back," she said, already standing. No explanation followed. I didn't ask for one. Instead, I grabbed a glass, filled it with water, drank half without tasting it. The quiet felt arranged, like furniture moved just enough to notice if you lived there long enough. Later that evening, an unfamiliar name popped up on my phone. A text from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Short, careful. He asked if I was in Chicago too. I reread it, then typed back that I wasn't traveling. A few seconds passed before the reply came through. He apologized, said he must have mixed things up, mentioned seeing my wife at a hotel downtown earlier that week, thought I'd been with her, added a line about how busy conferences could get, how faces blurred together. Nothing explicit, nothing solid, just enough to tilt the room. Doubt works quietly. It doesn't rush in. It adjusts what you think you already know. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There always was. My mind lined them up automatically, like it had practice doing that. The next day, access started changing. An account I checked weekly asked for additional verification. A shared folder at work no longer synced to my laptop. Calendar entries disappeared, replaced with blocks marked private. Each thing alone meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern I didn't want to name yet. When I asked about it, answers came fast and light. "It's just temporary. I thought you knew. You're reading too much into this." I nodded, let it pass, took mental notes instead. Late at night, after the house settled, I opened my laptop and began saving copies of things I'd never thought to protect before. Statements, emails, timestamps. Nothing dramatic, just records. Dates had a way of telling the truth when people didn't. I stopped answering one number altogether, let calls go to voicemail. The messages stacked up quickly, each one framed as concern, then confusion, then irritation. That alone said enough. At work, conversations shifted tone. Questions circled around availability, commitments, whether I planned to adjust priorities soon. Someone mentioned hearing I might be stepping back. The words didn't come from nowhere. They traveled through mouths that trusted the wrong source. I corrected what needed correcting, left the rest alone. Trust, I realized, had been redistributed without my consent. At home, she moved through the space like someone managing logistics. Instructions replaced discussion. When I pushed back lightly, she reacted like I was interrupting a process already underway. "We don't have time for this," she said one night, eyes on the screen. "I'm handling it." Handling it. As if I weren't part of the equation. I watched the kids more closely, listened to what they repeated, phrases they hadn't invented, explanations that sounded rehearsed. None of it was cruel, just curated. That hurt more than anger would have. One afternoon, I found a document open on the printer tray. Not hidden, just forgotten. It listed assets, allocations, contingencies. My name appeared often. My voice, nowhere. I folded it once, then again, and slid it into my bag without comment. The house carried on. Dinner needed finishing. Homework waited. A ride had to be given. Life didn't pause for clarity. Later, while rinsing plates, I caught my reflection in the dark window above the sink. The face looked familiar, older maybe, more guarded. Someone who had kept things together for a long time without checking the cost. I dried my hands, reached for my phone, and added another note to the list I hadn't planned on keeping, aware now that the order I trusted wasn't disappearing all at once, just loosening its grip one point. The meeting wasn't supposed to involve me. That much was clear from the way the agenda skipped my name and the way people avoided eye contact when I walked in. Chairs scraped. Someone cleared their throat. I took a seat anyway, set my phone face down, waited. She arrived late, confident, already speaking as she crossed the room. "We'll need to adjust a few things," she said, nodding toward the screen. "Some responsibilities are shifting." No preface, no warning. Numbers appeared. Accounts I recognized. Projects tied to my name now labeled transitional. The word sat there like it belonged. A few heads turned toward me, then away again. I asked one question. Simple, neutral. "When was this decided?" She didn't look at me when she answered. "It's been in motion for a while." That was the moment. Not because of what she said, but because of where she said it. In front of people who assumed coordination meant consent. Silence would read as agreement. Emotion would make me look unstable. I chose neither. "That's not accurate," I said. "Any changes involving my accounts require my approval." A pause followed. Not long, just long enough for discomfort to register. She smiled, the way someone does when they're ready to explain things away. "We're cleaning up exposure," she said. "He's been stretched thin." Stretched thin, like a liability, like a problem being managed. I didn't argue. Corrected one figure, clarified a date, pointed out a clause everyone else had missed. The room shifted slightly, but the damage had already been done. The narrative had landed first. Afterward, people approached in pairs, quiet questions, reassurances that sounded rehearsed. "You good? Let us know if you need anything." What they meant was clear. This was now something to watch. By afternoon, the consequences showed up in places that mattered. A transfer I'd initiated earlier in the week failed. Access to a discretionary fund froze pending review. An email arrived requesting documentation for expenses that had never been questioned before. I forwarded everything to a private folder and kept working. At home, the confrontation came without buildup. She stood in the doorway while I sorted mail, already irritated. "You embarrassed me today." I looked up slowly. "You spoke for me," I said. "That tends to happen." She stepped closer, voice dropping. "You didn't have to correct me like that." I corrected the numbers. That didn't satisfy her. She accused me of undermining, of making things harder than necessary, of not trusting her judgment. The words came fast, stacked one on top of another, each one designed to make me retreat. I didn't raise my voice, asked one question instead. Why was any of that public? Her answer came too quickly, because it had to be. Later that night, an alert came through about a property line of credit. Modified, not closed, adjusted just enough to change the terms. My name still attached, control quietly removed. That was the first real loss. Tangible, measurable. I sat at the table long after everyone else went to bed, laptop open, documents spread out in a way I'd never allowed before. The pattern was clear now, not chaos, strategy. Public pressure paired with private restriction. Defending myself had become proof of guilt. Staying calm read as weakness. Every move had been anticipated because I'd been predictable for too long. I sent a short message to Marcus. No details. Need to talk. Tomorrow. Then I closed the laptop and went upstairs. Checked on the kids. Adjusted a blanket. Listened for a moment to sounds that meant sleep, not tension. Back downstairs, I gathered the remaining mail, sorted it into piles that made sense to me, and began writing down what I could no longer afford to ignore, aware that the space for quiet fixes had narrowed to almost nothing as I kept going, page by page, without stopping. Marcus didn't waste time once I sat down. "I pulled what you sent," he said, sliding my folder back across the table. "This isn't messy, it's deliberate." Hearing that out loud shifted something. Until then, part of me had still framed everything as miscommunication layered on stress. Strategy carried a different weight. He pointed to a line I'd skimmed past more than once. Language buried in routine paperwork. Indemnification. Contingent liability. My name showed up where protection should have been. "If this goes wrong," he added, "you're the one standing in front of it." A memory surfaced without warning. Years earlier, her father asking me to co-sign something just to help smooth things out. I'd hesitated then. She'd laughed it off, said I was being cautious, said family didn't keep score. I had signed anyway. The pattern snapped into focus, not all at once, piece by piece. Trust repackaged as convenience, responsibility quietly rerouted. Marcus leaned back. "You can keep absorbing it," he said, "or you can separate yourself before it becomes permanent." Back in the car, the city moved like it always had. Nothing about the afternoon looked different. The choice sat there anyway, heavy and unavoidable. At home, the isolation sharpened. Messages stopped coming directly to me. Conversations paused when I entered a room. Plans were announced after they'd already been agreed upon elsewhere. I caught my name being used as justification more than participation. "He's fine with it," she said once, loud enough for others to hear. I corrected her quietly. "No, I'm not." The silence that followed didn't last. It turned into something else. Friends checked in with concern edged with doubt. One asked whether everything was okay at work. Another mentioned hearing I might need time off soon. None of them said where they'd heard it. They didn't need to. The pressure wasn't accidental anymore. It was being applied. At night, I reviewed documents while the house slept, compared versions, noted changes, saved everything twice, once digitally, once somewhere harder to reach. The work felt methodical, almost calming. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. She noticed. "You're acting strange," she said, watching me from the doorway. "I'm paying attention." That answer irritated her more than anger would have. She accused me of pulling away, of being paranoid, of creating distance where none was needed. The language shifted from partnership to management. I didn't argue. Let the words pass through without catching. Later, an email circulated that shouldn't have, framed carefully, concerned tone, suggested instability. Nothing explicit, enough to plant doubt, enough to make people step back. That was the moment clarity settled in, not as rage, as relief. This wasn't about fixing a relationship, it was about preventing erasure. I called Marcus again. "I want to move forward," I said. "Then we do it clean," he replied. "By the book. No noise." The next steps didn't require permission. I separated accounts within legal bounds, redirected communications, filed notices that changed who could speak for me. Each action small. Combined, they shifted the balance. At dinner, conversations stayed surface level. The kids talked about school. I listened, asked questions, made plans that involved them directly. The future narrowed to what I could control. Later, while clearing plates, my phone buzzed again. Another message passed along by someone else. Another concern framed as care. I set it face down. Upstairs, I opened the drawer where I'd placed everything that mattered and added one more document to the stack, aware now that staying comfortable had cost me too much already, and that whatever came next would follow from this point forward as I closed the drawer and reached for the light. The flight to Austin left early enough that no one asked questions. I packed light, carried only what I needed, and told the kids I'd be back before the weekend ended. They nodded, already used to adults moving around plans without explanation. That bothered me more than the trip itself. The law office didn't look impressive. That was fine. I wasn't there for reassurance. I laid everything out on the table without trying to organize the story into something sympathetic. Dates, documents, names. The order mattered more than tone. The attorney skimmed, stopped, then read again more carefully. "You're not reacting late," she said. "You're reacting just in time." Hearing that didn't feel like relief. It felt like confirmation. We talked about options that didn't escalate things publicly. Separation of exposure, clear boundaries, steps that couldn't be undone once taken. Each decision narrowed the field but strengthened the footing. I took notes, asked questions that mattered, avoided the ones that only satisfied curiosity. Back at the hotel, I reviewed everything again, compared my notes to what I already had, adjusted timelines, highlighted inconsistencies. The work absorbed attention in a way emotion hadn't been able to. Thinking clearly took effort, but it held. Calls from home went unanswered. Messages stacked up, tone shifting from neutral to sharp. I let them sit. Nothing needed immediate response. On the second night, my email flagged a login attempt from an unfamiliar location. Not blocked, just noted. I changed credentials, enabled additional verification, documented the time. No reaction beyond that. In the morning, I walked a few blocks before heading back to the office. No destination in mind, just moving. A car slowed near the corner longer than necessary. Maybe nothing. I didn't assume more than I needed to. Awareness didn't require paranoia. The attorney confirmed filings would go through quietly. Notices would be sent, access adjusted. Nothing flashy, no accusations, just facts rearranged to reflect reality. On the flight back, I didn't listen to music. Watched the seatbelt light instead. Thought about how often I'd confused calm with safety. They weren't the same thing. At home, the atmosphere had shifted. Not louder, tighter. She spoke carefully now, measured words, questions disguised as concern. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Busy," I said. That answer used to satisfy her. It didn't anymore. I noticed small things changing. Files moved, conversations happening behind closed doors, the kids repeating phrases that hadn't come from me. None of it surprised me. It just confirmed timing. At work, a system flagged unusual activity tied to an account that shouldn't have been touched. I forwarded the alert to myself, then archived it. Another note added to the list. Marcus checked in that evening. "You good?" "Focused." That's different. He wasn't wrong. Sleep came easier than it had in weeks. Not because things were better, but because they were defined. I woke before the alarm, reviewed the day, moved through it without second-guessing. Later, while clearing out old files, I found a message I'd saved years ago. A reminder to myself about boundaries I hadn't enforced then. I didn't linger on it, deleted the note after copying the date. Dinner passed without conflict. The kids talked. I listened. Made sure tomorrow's logistics went through me directly. That felt important. After they went upstairs, I locked the door, checked the alarm, and sat down with the stack I'd been building. The weight of it didn't press down the way it once would have. It felt contained. Another alert came through. Different account. Same pattern. I wrote it down, set the phone aside, and kept working. Aware now that the quiet wasn't fragile anymore, just temporary, as I turned the page and prepared the next step without looking up. The call came while I was signing paperwork at my desk. Not from her. From a compliance officer I'd never spoken to directly. "We need clarification on several transactions tied to your name," she said. "This isn't an accusation, it's a review." Reviews don't start without reason. I asked what prompted it. She cited concerns raised internally, documentation already submitted, timelines that didn't line up. Someone had connected enough dots to make noise. I thanked her, asked for a list, ended the call without committing to anything beyond cooperation. Before I could refocus, my phone lit up again. Her mother this time. No greeting. "What's going on?" she asked. "People are talking." People always were. I told her I was handling it. She pressed, voice sharp, accusing me of creating instability. mentioned the kids, mentioned family reputation. The familiar pressure points lined up neatly. I ended that call too. The rest of the day unraveled faster than I expected. Access I'd preserved tightened. An account flagged for temporary restriction. A meeting request marked urgent. A message forwarded to me by a colleague, framed as concern but carrying distance underneath. By the time I got home, the house felt crowded without being loud. She sat at the table, documents already arranged. "We need to talk," she said. I stayed standing. She accused me of acting behind her back, of escalating things unnecessarily, of risking everything we'd built. The words came with precision, practiced, each one designed to land somewhere tender. "You're scaring people," she added. "That doesn't help your case." That was the line. Case. As if this had already been decided. I asked one question. "What did you submit?" She hesitated, just long enough. "Information," she said, "to protect us." Protection had a shape now, one that didn't include me. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, an email arrived from legal counsel I hadn't authorized. Written on my behalf, defensive in tone, contained admissions I hadn't made. It referenced documents I'd never seen. My chest tightened, not from panic, but from recognition. This was the move I'd been preparing for without naming, the one that could have buried me if I'd stayed passive. I forwarded the email to Marcus and the attorney in Austin. No commentary, just evidence. Then I sat there for a long time, hands flat on the table, feeling the weight of years pressing in at once. Every compromise reframed, every silence reconsidered. The cost tallied quietly. I thought about the kids upstairs, about the version of me they were watching, the one who absorbed pressure until it erased him. That image hurt more than the threat of loss. The response from Austin came quickly. "Do not reply," the attorney wrote. "We move now." That was it. No drama, no reassurance, direction. I gathered the documents already prepared, added the new email, printed everything twice. One copy went into the drawer, the other into my bag. I separated personal items from shared space without announcing it, just enough to function. She noticed. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Taking responsibility," I said. That answer didn't satisfy her. It didn't need to. The next morning, I dropped the kids off myself, spoke to the school about permissions, updated records, made sure nothing moved without my name attached. The looks I got were curious, cautious. I didn't explain. At work, I attended the meeting I'd been asked to postpone, brought documentation, answered questions directly, didn't speculate, let facts do the talking. By late afternoon, the sense of collapse had slowed, not reversed, just contained. The ground still felt unstable, but it was holding. When I got home, she wasn't there yet. I made dinner anyway, set the table, helped with homework, moved through the evening as if continuity mattered, because it did. After the kids went upstairs, I sat alone for a moment, phone face down, bag by the door, aware that everything I'd avoided had converged into this narrow stretch of time. And instead of freezing, I stood up, picked up the bag, and stepped into the next task waiting without hesitation. The email arrived without a subject line, no greeting either, just a forwarded thread and a single sentence. "I think you should see this." The sender was someone I barely remembered from a conference years back. We'd exchanged cards, nothing more. The attachment opened to a chain of messages between vendors, dates aligned too neatly to ignore. My wife's name appeared where it shouldn't have. So did a hotel invoice in Chicago, time-stamped during the days she'd said she was in meetings all day. The amount matched a reimbursement request I'd approved months earlier, back when approvals still felt routine. I didn't rush to conclusions, saved everything, checked headers, compared dates against my own records. The overlap wasn't subtle, it was precise. Marcus called a few minutes later. "You got it?" he asked. "I'm looking." "Don't move yet," he said. "Let's confirm before anyone knows you have it." That restraint mattered. Surface advantages still favored her. She controlled the story people heard first. She'd rehearsed denial and knew how to deliver it convincingly. At home, the tone stayed measured. Questions came wrapped in concern. Accusations softened into worry. "You look tired," she said. "This can't be healthy." I nodded and kept my answers short. The kids needed help with a project. I sat with them, asked about school, let their normalcy steady my pace. Later, once they were upstairs, she tried again. "We should talk to someone together," she said, "before this gets worse." I'm already talking to people, I replied. That was enough to trigger the shift. Her voice sharpened. She warned me about consequences, about how things looked from the outside, about how isolation could damage credibility. None of it landed the way it once would have. The next day, I met with the attorney again. We went through the emails, line by line. She cross-checked vendor records, pulled public filings, and flagged a discrepancy I hadn't noticed. A shell entity, temporary, set up quickly, dissolved just as fast. This is the hinge, she said. Not the affair, the control. That word fit. Control explained the careful timing, the gradual isolation, the public framing. It wasn't recklessness, it was management. A call came in while we were still reviewing documents. Unknown number. I let it ring out. The voicemail followed, tense and clipped, warning me not to misinterpret things I didn't understand. The threat stayed indirect. That was telling too. By evening, she was already ahead of me publicly. Messages circulated expressing concern for her stress. People reached out offering support. I was careful not to respond defensively. Let silence hold its shape. At work, I requested a formal review session and submitted documentation through proper channels. No commentary, no accusations, just records arranged in order. Back home, she watched me pack a small bag. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I have meetings." "About what?" "Boundaries." That didn't sit well. She accused me of staging things, of twisting narratives, of trying to win something that didn't need to be won. I didn't argue, loaded the bag into the car, and drove across town to Marcus's place. We spread the documents across his kitchen table, cross-referenced everything, then made a list. Short, specific, what mattered and what didn't. "You don't need to expose everything," he said. "Just enough." The realization settled in quietly. The weakness wasn't her story. It was her reliance on mine staying silent. When I got home later, the house was quiet. A note sat on the counter. Vague, emotional, framed as confusion. I didn't respond. Placed the new evidence into the folder, labeled it clearly, and set it with the rest. The sequence made sense now, not in hindsight, in real time. I set the alarm, checked on the kids, and sat down to prepare for the next day's schedule, aware that the final conversation hadn't happened yet, but that the ground it would stand on had already been chosen as I opened my calendar and began blocking time. The room wasn't hostile, just formal enough to strip emotion out of the air. Long table, neutral faces, everyone there for reasons that didn't include sympathy. I took my seat, set the folder down, waited. She arrived with confidence intact, dressed for credibility, voice steady when she spoke first, framing events as concern-driven decisions made under pressure. She referenced stress, misunderstandings, painted herself as the one trying to keep things together while I unraveled. Heads nodded, pens moved. When my turn came, I didn't counter her story. I didn't need to. "I'd like to submit documentation," I said, sliding the folder forward. The review panel accepted it without comment. Pages turned. A pause stretched longer than comfort allowed. She shifted in her chair. "Those emails are out of context," she said quickly. "Anyone can make timing look suspicious." I asked permission to speak again and waited until it was granted. "The context is included," I said. "Headers, timestamps, vendor confirmations. The shell entity dissolves 2 days after the transfer. That's not coincidence." Silence settled in layers. She tried one last angle. Accused me of surveillance. Claimed violation of privacy. Suggested obsession. The words echoed versions I'd heard before, sharpened for a wider audience. That was the moment it almost worked. The familiar doubt surfaced, old reflex urging retreat. Keep peace, absorb blame, move on quietly. Instead, I opened the second folder. "This is the indemnification clause," I said. "Signed without my consent, submitted alongside a letter written in my name." The panel leaned forward now. "I didn't write it," I added, "and I didn't authorize it." Her attorney interrupted, voice controlled, requesting a recess. The request was denied. Questions followed, direct ones, about access, about authority, about intent. She answered some, deflected others. The rhythm changed. Control slipped in increments too small to dramatize but too large to ignore. When they asked why the disclosures hadn't been shared with me, she hesitated. That pause did more damage than any document. By the time the meeting adjourned, nothing had been decided publicly. That wasn't the point. The ground had shifted, quietly, permanently. Outside, she confronted me in the hallway. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "You could have talked to me." "I tried," I replied. "You managed it instead." Her expression tightened. She accused me of ruining everything, of choosing pride over family, of thinking I'd won something. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to negotiate. At work, the outcome unfolded without spectacle. Responsibilities reassigned, reviews formalized, my position stabilized. Hers entered review. No announcements, just adjustments. At home, the atmosphere thinned. She packed some things, left notes framed as explanations. I didn't answer them. The kids asked where she was going. "We're figuring things out," I said. That was true enough. Later, alone in the kitchen, I cleared the last of the paperwork into a single stack. Nothing left to add, nothing left to defend. Marcus texted, "You okay?" "Clear," I replied. I took the folders to the drawer and placed them where they belonged, locked it, then turned to the small tasks waiting. Dishes, tomorrow's schedule, permission slips, ordinary things that didn't ask me to disappear. The day ended without ceremony. I shut off the lights, checked the doors, and sat for a moment longer than necessary, letting the quiet stay as it was while I reached for the calendar and began adjusting what came next. The house felt different once the decisions stopped circulating and settled into place. Not empty, just honest. Mornings ran on simpler tracks. Breakfast, backpacks, quick reminders about homework and rides. I stayed present without hovering, learning where to step back without disappearing. Paperwork followed its own timeline. Notices arrived, accounts adjusted, lawyers spoke to each other without looping me into every exchange. I read what mattered and signed where I needed to. Nothing dramatic came with it. Consequences rarely announced themselves loudly. She reached out once, then again. Messages shifted tone, cycling through anger, confusion, nostalgia. Each one asked for something without saying it directly. An opening, a reaction, a softening. I didn't reply. That silence wasn't punishment. It was structure. The kids adapted faster than I expected. They asked fewer questions than adults usually do, accepted routines when they were consistent. I made sure they knew where I'd be and when. Promises stayed small and solid. That mattered more than explanations. At work, people stopped tiptoeing. Meetings focused again. Decisions landed where authority actually lived. A few colleagues apologized in passing, awkward but sincere. I nodded and moved on. No corrections needed. Time clarified what arguments never could. One afternoon, a final notice came through confirming her removal from roles she'd overextended into. Language stayed neutral. Procedures followed. I read it once and filed it away without satisfaction or regret. It wasn't mine to feel either way. The habit of overgiving didn't vanish overnight. I caught it surfacing in small moments, agreeing too quickly, carrying more than necessary. Each time, I paused and adjusted. Boundaries worked best when practiced quietly. A weekend came with no obligations, no calls, no urgent messages. I took the kids to the park, listened more than I talked, let the day unfold without steering it. That felt new. Later, after they were asleep, I packed the last box. Not much inside. Things I didn't need daily, but didn't want to lose. I taped it shut, wrote my name on the side, and set it by the door. She didn't come by. No confrontation waited. That absence felt appropriate. I checked the calendar one last time. Custody schedules confirmed, meetings blocked, space accounted for. The future didn't look perfect. It looked workable. Before leaving, I walked through the house once more, turned off lights, straightened what needed straightening, left the rest alone. Some rooms carried echoes I didn't linger on. Outside, the air moved without asking anything of me. I loaded the box into the trunk, closed it, and sat in the driver's seat for a moment. No speech formed, no summary needed. The engine started. I pulled away from the curb, merged into traffic, and followed the route already set, letting the quiet stay intact as the road opened ahead and the next ordinary task waited just beyond the turn.